Hi, I'm Chris from airwindows, and here I am again. I know that people have been saying, oh, you should take some time off. Things have been so tough lately. Yeah, that's true. I suppose maybe I can, maybe I will. But I had something, I wanted to put out another plugin for you guys and to see what I can do to keep things moving as best I can. And I have something kind of cool, namely Spiral2. See, here's Spiral, which is the no controls or anything plugin, but people wanted controls, and here's Spiral2. Look, it has controls. It's got an input gain, it's got output level and dry wet. Like density and drive, it has a high pass control, and it has this other funny control called presence, which I'll be telling you about later. And let's see, we'll kick in a little bit shift gain so that it is not oppressively loud to listen to. So this is what Spiral sounds like. I'll kick forward to a noisy bit. This was the one that doesn't sound very aggressively distorted. However, if we switch on to Spiral2, you can have it aggressively distorted if you want to. Because it's the same algorithm as in here, but this one has the knobs and stuff. So here's how these knobs work. Input gain and output level are kind of what you would think. This goes to 0. I'll show you. If you turn it on, it goes to 0. Always useful to turn things on. It's been like this all day. I've been trying to get some of these stuff together. It's really hard for me to focus, but I'll do my best, and I won't try to push it too hard. Anyways, the unity gain is 0.5, and you can also use output level the same way. And you can turn input gain. One is twice as loud, like this is half as loud and twice as loud. Now you'll notice it kind of scrunches in a weird way because this is consistent with the original Spiral in that the distortion curve that it doesn't stop at full crank. It'll continue going over, so it sort of squelches a little bit if you drive it too hard. It just is sort of something to make it a little more organic, and it gives it its own sound, which basically means just don't do this. You may find that it's yucky if you do it. However, one thing that will happen is that if you have little short transients that go way beyond like that, it'll clamp them in a useful way. So basically what you want to do is find the sweet spot where it's not oppressively doing horrible things anymore. Now I mentioned some other things. For instance, I mentioned a high pass. High pass is kind of like this. It's a very good high pass. That affects the spiral section. It does not affect... That's a very extreme high pass. It does not affect the dry signal. So you can combine these things as you can with density or drive by using the high pass and the distorty stuff, and then blending them so that you're still getting some undistorted bass through. And the remaining control is something a little bit more special. This is a thing called presence, and I can show that to you more easily on Something Anything, because it's brighter. So here what we're going to do, and I'm going to turn things up a little bit. Listen to those hats and things. then I'll take it back away again. Mind you, it's still bright, but there's this funny sort of holographic thing going on when you get the presence control cranked up, and I'll tell you how I do it. It's also in the code, because this is going to be open source, of course, but I'll tell you how I do it. If you have a signal and say distortion is like this line up here and this line down here on the bottom, and then you've got a central part, and that is 0, like if the signal is 0, it's silent and it's just staying within here. You go up here and it clips, distorts. The way that a sine-based thing works is sort of applying this curve so that as you get closer and closer to the top, it'll increasingly saturate. It's a very smooth curve, but the whole idea of Spiral was that as the signal is coming through the center point, the rate of change flips at this point and becomes instantly the reverse, and then it starts curving the other way again. So the idea with Spiral is that it'll blend through the central area, and the closer you are to the center, the closer it will start doing a dry-wet thing, but it will be a dry-wet thing at the speed of once per sample. It's just combining them in such a way that as you go through the center, it's a dry signal. And then as you go farther out to the edges, it goes into the distorted signal. And that's why Spiral has the sound that it does. But what if you took the signal on one thing and then you measured the last sample that came through, which would be like here, say, and then you did the saturation curve on the signal the way it's supposed to be, but then you apply the blending between like basically wet and dry for how close you are to the center on the previous sample instead of the current sample. That's what presence does. It takes this the previous sample and it uses that and not the sample that it's currently distorting to determine whether it's going to be doing the dry or wet. As you might imagine with many signals like sine waves and such low frequency stuff, this isn't going to make any difference, but the super high frequencies are affected. And here's what it kind of sounds like. Listen to this ride cymbal. It's nice and loud so you can hear it. In fact, I'll turn it up. And now listen to what happens when I turn presence on. Interesting effect, huh? I'll take it out. It's normal and well behaved. Full presence. Now, one thing you'll also notice is that it has this sort of strange ambience around everything. Like everything gets a little more holographic and weird, but there's a cost, and I'm going to show you what that cost is. We'll go back to empty pictures and one of its loud bits. And what we're going to do is I'm going to turn bit shift down even more. And then we're going to blast it, and I'm going to show you what happens to the output level. I'm going to kill this clip only. That's the solution to a problem I'm about to show you. And then we're going to obliterate it completely. Now you can see what that's doing on span. Bit shift gain is making it be bearable. See that it's minus 1.4 down here? Watch what happens when I put it to presence 1. You may not have heard a difference, but the meter shows how much high frequency energy is coming through here. and being recorded. And then again, and this is just obliterating it. It's overloading everything beyond any reasonable amount. And then if I take presence back down to 0 again, that's regular spiral. That's spiral without this presence thing. What's happening is I'm doing 2 separate parallel versions of spiral. This one over here with presence 0 is regular, the spiral algorithm with the effect being done all on what's within one sample. Over here, at spiral is 1, it's the algorithm with all of the dry wet stuff happening on the previous sample. And the rest of it, this is just a crossfade. There's 2 different sounds here, and you get to pick between the 2. And an interesting thing about that is, although they did not really have identical levels, if you pick 0.5, you're very close to neutral, which is rather interesting. I'm not quite sure what that means. It's the sort of thing that one would perhaps pay more attention to. And then again, we're distorting this horribly. So I'm thinking, to demonstrate what you get with a more normal setup, and again, bit shift gain is padding this down heavily. We can start pushing it heavily into there. And we can see that we're clipping just a little tiny bit. We could chill that out by pulling presence back, but remember how I had clip only in here? It's also possible to just throw in something like clip only. And you notice that it's stepping on the highs because clip only is like a simplified version of AD clip. And if it's going into a clip, it's going to slow the attack of that clip somewhat. So with this, you can push the presence as far as you want. Oh, by the way, if you're interested to know how loud that really is, that is not clipping significantly, and it's this loud. Which is pretty loud. Anyway, that is Spiral2. And it's got some new tricks. You might not want to use this presence. One thing I have found is that sometimes when I have the presence all cranked out, I can get it to misbehave in an interesting way that I'm not sure how it's doing it. Like, we'll pad stuff way down with bit shift gain. Crank it out. Sometimes if I stop it in the middle of that, there will be a little sort of tizzy hangover, and I'm not sure what's making it happen. And now that I'm talking about it, I can't make it happen. But just be warned, sometimes if presence is cranked up like that, there can be a hangover effect, and I'm not sure where it's coming from. This is one of those weird little plugins where, you know, the dark magic of the thing sometimes is much to be observed. Anyways. A little presence here. Or half the presence. Default is 0.5. Or maybe a little less. I mean, if it turns out that you like using this to crank into, and then you like either presence of 0 or presence of less than 0.5, it won't be giving you any overs. But if you did have overs, there's clip only to deal with it for you. And I'm tired because I've been wrestling with new versions of Logic and new versions of ScreenFlow, and I think I've got everything working. And I have more plugins to make tonight before I can rest. But here's Spiral2 with some of the features that people were wanting to see out of Spiral, and I really hope you like it. Thanks.